Oh, and my tweet worked this time. It never normally works lately. Like my tweets, I feel like Elon Musk could like shadow ban me or something for I don't know, like existing. Like I barely tweet from the account anymore. The Exodus is very much upon us, ain't it? Really. All right, we are live. Episode 250, gents. Big milestone today.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame that we have to be doing it via Brentford and Arsenal, 1 point from 6, and it is what it is. But yeah, we're here nonetheless. We're what 5+ years into this almost, or 5 years in August, fair way through. And Craig, obviously, you jumped in a couple of years in when I went from solo to trio. And Adam is in California, so he's not even here today. And Robin, you were very much involved throughout the years as well, weren't you? So, you know, we've got a bit of a legacy building, a bit of a dynasty building on this podcast.
We have.
Love it.
Let's start with the most fun topic of conversation, and that is, of course, the 0-0 thrilling draw away at Brentford this Wednesday. How are we feeling about 1 point from 6, starting off at Brentford away and finishing at Arsenal at home? Was that what you were expecting? Better than you expected? Worse? The same? What were your hopes going into these two games?
I know we did our run-in predictions a few weeks ago, didn't we?
We did.
And I can't remember what I predicted, but probably a point against Brentford was probably the most likely outcome. They've been a team that we've struggled against, I think. Probably safe to say over the time they've been in the Premier League. And, you know, Arsenal, whilst we do have a decent record against them, you know, you strip everything else away and they're in great form, aren't they? I mean, they've like not conceded in like 6 away games. They've gone to the Etihad and kept a clean sheet against Man City, which, you know, hardly anyone does ever, basically. And, you know, we'll probably get onto the referee at some point. But, you know, that aside, not getting any points against Arsenal was not that surprising. So, you know, best case scenario, it would have been 3 from 6, 1 from 6. Yeah, not that fussed, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we all sort of said, I think we probably said 3 points against Brentford just from just a glass half full type deal. Like, I hope we get 3 because we're going to get absolutely naught from the other one. So yeah, it's about on brand, I guess. But it's still only 1 point from 6, and we're kind of dropping a little bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's really not much to talk about with this Brentford game other than the penalty shot. Really, I think is about it. But we'll talk about it a little bit as best we can. But on the whole, I've seen a few people give the same sentiments in different ways of wording it. But after the Roma game, and as we come into this final 10, is it fair to feel like this is almost the epilogue of a part of our story at this point, this last 8 or 10 games?
Oh yeah, they're totally pointless. Like, legitimately, they're just an absolute waste of everyone's time. The only good thing we'll get out of it is Baleba having a run in the team, pretty much. Yeah. I think, you know, that Wolves and Roma games have just ended the season, haven't they?
It feels that way, I think. Yeah. What about you, Craig? Do you feel the same apathy from over there? Like, obviously, we're still going to be here. We're still going to do these episodes. But, you know, with the way the league is breaking up now, it seems to be filtering into its own little worlds, right? Like, your top 3 are very much in a big race with each other. Your 4th v 5th head-to-head is very much ongoing as well. And now you've got these little pocket fights as well, 6th through 8th, 9th through 13th. And then kind of 14th through 18th. And then, you know, the less said about Burnley and Sheffield United, the better. But there's quite a few pockets of scraps in there, but they're all like quite significantly spaced apart. It's people listening to it on the radio or, you know, wherever you're listening to it from, like, go check the table. Like, you'll see exactly what I'm saying. Like, they really have all been kind of passed out into nice little mini groups, haven't they? Do you feel much excitement and hype going into this, essentially this fight for ninth that we're effectively in right now, Craig? What's your thoughts on it?
No, I don't. And I think, but at the same time, like, we are where we are for a reason, right? And we've had a decent campaign, irrespective. I think if you go and look at our pre-season predictions and stuff, we're probably about where we thought we were going to be. I think it was generally around 8th to 10th. Like, you know, we'll struggle with Europe, everything, and basically everything that's happened was quite easily predictable. You know, barring, you know, the additional injuries that maybe we wouldn't have expected, or the longevity of those injuries. So I think we're exactly where we thought we would be. It's going to be disappointing if we get as far down as 12th or 13th. So with that, the next 8 games are now about damage limitation for me, rather than looking up. And I know that sounds incredibly pessimistic for people to listen to and to watch, but it's how I feel, is that, you know, we kind of need to be looking at how far we can get up and maybe not drop, as opposed to, yes, we can make Europe, because I think it's just out of the question now, given our running as well, right? You look at the form, look at the injuries, look at the running. It's going to be tough to even get into 7th or 8th at this point. So yeah, there is some general mehness around, you know, the rest of these games, especially how hard they are and how we're playing. So, you know, we can do the best that we can do, but I'm not expecting anything, and I think that's how I feel.
I would love to know from the listeners, like, how you feel about this point in the season. I would love to hear from you and your thoughts. You know, 31 games in, 7 left to go, like 8 left to go, 7 left to go. We're nearly finished. I'd love to know what your thoughts are as well, like whether it's just us that feel this way, or whether, you know, for those, okay, trying to do this as nicely as possible. For those of you that are really passionate about the financial side of the way football clubs are run, for the listeners that are really passionate about that and the bank balances that are involved, and obviously the accounts that came out last week that were phenomenal. We talked about that last episode, though I don't want to go too into the weeds on that one, because we were talking about it before they take it down and then put it back up. But for those of you that are really, really passionate about the money side of things and making sure that bank balance is healthy, like, I would love to hear from you guys how you feel about the 9th to 13th battle, because I think there's about 12 to 15 million quid involved in that. Like, does that, Robin, for you, like, does that hold any major incentive for you as a fan? Like, for some it absolutely will, for others it won't at all. Like, how do you two sit on the idea of 13th to 9th is worth 10 to 15 million quid?
I think it doesn't a huge amount. I think ordinarily it probably would, but we're in a run where, you know, we've made a record Premier League profit, and, you know, next year we're probably going to be all right. I mean, even if we go on a vaguely wild summer spending spree, you know, we've still got the Caicedo and Sanchez deals that have not been included in last year's. So no, I'm probably not. I think it's certainly not worth busting a gut to get 9th as opposed to 12th. Like, I think in that, I mean, there's no benefit, right? I mean, obviously there's the 15 million, but there's no macro benefit really from finishing 9th as opposed to 13th in my book. I think what we'll get out of it, what De Zerbi's basically got now is he's got 6-7 games to effectively try and give Baleba as many minutes as possible. Because I think we're seeing recently that he's been the bright spot in the last few games, and he is getting better and better every game. He's probably got, I know I've seen various things, he's maybe got 6 or 7 games to try out something different, if that's at all in his DNA. I'm not sure it is, but we'll see. But I mean, I know this season we've got the 13th highest wage budget in the division, or we're 13th in that spot. So we're probably going to finish about where we should. Our wage budget tells you we should do, which, considering that basically everyone's been injured at some point, is all right. I mean, that's saying we should finish 13th if everybody is fit, effectively. So to
feels
finish,
like if you take out Ansu Fati, that might drop a bit, eh?
Probably, it probably drops down. I mean, I know last year we were like 16th, I think 16th or 17th in that little division, as it were. But, you know, I think the main thing to take away from it, and I know we are going to get into this at some point, but the fact that, we're not in any, we've not been in a relegation battle. Yes, we have been in a battle for Europe in terms of the league table, but realistically, injuries kind of put paid to that a while ago. I think we've kind of been padded slightly by other teams not taking their chances to overtake us quicker than they have. Realistically, results have not been European form worthy for quite a while, I would suggest. And that's not a negative. I mean, I don't think anyone really, once the injury started to mount up, would really have gone, yeah, we're a dead cert for Europe. The fact that we've still been in the conversation mathematically, and we still are in the conversation mathematically with 6-7 games to go, is remarkable, really. But I think, if we look back to the beginning of the season, we said we wanted to have a good run in Europe. And I think we have, by any metric, to get to the last 16, to win the group that we did, to beat every opponent at least once that we played, constitutes a good run in Europe, I think. And we wanted to ideally go deep into one of the cup competitions, which, unfortunately we didn't quite manage to do it. And we thought, if we do that and we're in and around the conversation for a top half or a European spot, I think everyone's taking that at the start of the season, even before you factor in any of the injuries that have taken place. So I'm very content with where we are and what's happened, pretty much.
Yeah. Craig, obviously, this is going to sound like a stupid question, because the money that comes with Europe, the prestige that comes with Europe, the opportunities that come with Europe are obviously outstanding and great. But like from your perspective, is it kind of a good thing we might miss out on Europe this year in terms of a squad building perspective and a team perspective? Bearing in mind, it seems quite likely that De Zerbi is off to Bayern, given the German media losing their minds over it all week. Seems that he's been ruled out of just about everywhere else. Barcelona have gone crawling back to Xavi when they've realised that they are so skint they can't afford anybody, even on a free, it looks like. So they're just hoping that Xavi will stay with them, which is really quite, it's just embarrassing for La Liga in general, really, isn't it? But from an Albion perspective, and knowing where we are, and obviously taking into the accounts and looking at that and thinking, well, the European money isn't going to be the be-all end-all this year. The likelihood of a new manager being 50-50 at worst, right? Like, odds are it will happen, but at minimum 50-50. Like, do you think it's arguably like a good thing to miss out on Europe this season for the position we'll be in, or do you think that no, definitely not? Like, the benefits of Europe always outweigh not making it?
I think in most cases it does, right? But with I guess smaller teams or maybe lesser inexperienced teams on that European stage, it can get quite a lot. You've seen a lot of drop-offs of the Burnleys of the world, suddenly getting into Europe and then just falling like a stone, right? So if you're able to put in the performance that we did, and I just echo everything Robin said, is that it's a great showing this year, because we're still in and about where we want to be, right? We could have dropped a lot further, especially with the injuries and how far we got into that competition. So I do. Every fan, I'm sure, would say, yes, you just give me Europe every year and stuff. But, we're still going to expectedly go through some change, whether it be the manager, whether it be a few more players that are sold, or, maybe we need to spend quite a lot that's been sort of hinted at this summer, in which case you need time for these guys to bed in and adapt and all of this lovely stuff. So it could be a blessing in disguise that you don't have that many matches next year, especially if you're going to potentially have a new manager and you're going to have the domestic cups, which we should also be focusing on at the level. So it could be. I think every fan would say, yeah, let's have European football every year, but sometimes it's not sustainable. And if you're going to talk about financials as well, the financial incentive of the Europa League is obviously quite high, but we're already doing very good, right? So that's not a make or break for this team. Financially, we're so sound that actually we're still okay without the injection of European football money. So I think from that side, I think all bases covered. It could mean less games means that, we could do better in other competitions. I don't think anyone would say it's unfair to say that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Stephen in the chat saying that, can you believe that 16 months ago that in a way we're disappointed in this season? comeback relegation fights all are forgiven something to play for, right? It's very rare that the Albion don't have anything to play for in a season. In the, you know, the 20 plus years of being a fan, and you guys are similar ages to me, so we've all lived it. Like you can count on one hand like the amount of like nothing seasons towards the end that we've actually had. Like we've very rarely had nothing to play for 7 games for sure. He's also hoping for runouts for Igor and a few of the cusp players to see where we need to build up. I'd actually argue we've seen enough of that, honestly, with the amount of injuries we've had this season. Maybe that's like a bit of an unpopular one, but I think we've seen more than enough of where we need to bulk up, simply because De Zerbi has been forced to utilize his whole squad and has put out more different squads or more players or whatever than any team in the league by a bajillion miles. But let's talk Brentford and Arsenal in terms of those squads and some of the important pieces that have developed this week. First of all, it looks like we are creeping ever so slowly towards having a real number one goalkeeper. What did you think of his performances this week?
Terrific. I mean, yes, he made a couple of great saves yesterday. I know we've done this kind of to death over the last few months, but I think he's had 4 or 5 games in a row now, something like that.
It's 5. No, neither goalkeeper has ever had 5 starts this season. That's the most. They've hit 4, but this is now the most starts in a row for either of them.
He's looked, as you'd expect, having a run of games, he's looked increasingly confident as the run has gone on, which is kind of not, it's not rocket science, right? Especially as a goalkeeper. He has looked more and more comfortable, made a couple of great saves. I think he's commanding his penalty area pretty well. There were patches earlier in the season where he looked a bit shaky when he was coming for corners. Interestingly enough, Arsenal away being one of them, where I think it was their first goal where he made a complete mess of a corner and we weren't defending at the back post. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing in his performances to make any argument against him being our solid number one, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there's not much more to add, really. I think you play a goalkeeper consistently, you're going to get consistent performances, maybe. So I'm just happy if we're going to settle on one or the other. It needed to happen. Let's hope this threshold is actually something, and we will continue to see it, because it would be perfect De Zerbi just to whack Steele a goal on Saturday.
Yeah, at Turf Moor, yeah, brilliant. And another one, obviously, probably the biggest talking point in terms of the lineup on Wednesday and beyond, really, is the return of João Pedro. And not just the return of João Pedro, but the return of João Pedro, and he goes a full 90 minutes and looks full of beans, basically, the entire run through. With nothing left really to play for, and I know there's probably some people out there that are like slamming their dashboard saying how negative we are here, but with nothing really too much to play for here, with the prospects of European football kind of flitting away, like how important is it to be playing Pedro a lot and getting as many good results as you want? Or do you worry a little bit and are like, you know what, like it is what it is this season, let's just hold off on João Pedro? How worried were you, Robin, watching him play a full 90 minutes and then come on again at Arsenal? Are you on what side of the camp are you on that?
I think it's the most frustrating thing is you go, it's that kind of what might have been, right? If João Pedro's fit for Wolves away and Roma away, this whole conversation arguably is probably wildly different. So in one sense, it was really annoying to be reminded of quite how good he is and quite how much we rely on him for our attacking output. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo you. I mean, I'm kind of neutral on it, right? Like, if he scores, 10 goals between now and the end of the season, great. If he doesn't score any goals between now and the end of the season and doesn't get injured, equally great. I'm just like, it's kind of, in a sense, him being fully fit now is, I'm not trying to be negative, but it's not the most useful. It's not the most useful part of the season for him to come dancing back to full fitness, and that's just circumstances of when he got injured, right?
Yeah, I think there's also, if we're talking around this, there's still things to play for, but not, you're not bearing down on a European spot, then maybe there's less pressure for him too. And you don't really need to, go all out, or you don't need to risk him in a way that you maybe would have. So yeah, it's a pain in the butt that we didn't have him for those pivotal games, right? We know how good he is. I don't necessarily want to wrap him up in cotton wool either, because he still needs to go out there and score goals and effectively put us in the shop window for other players anyway. And I think this is where I was tying it into the 9th versus the 13th stuff, right? Is if you're trying to spend a lot of money this year or this summer, and you're a team that's just come off the back of European football, fantastic, but you finished 13th in the Premier League, it's a lot more of a difficult conversation than 8th or 9th. At least for me, I haven't been involved in a lot of those conversations, if at all. So, but I assume that conversation is a lot easier, right? In going, we are on the cusp of European football again, like we're that close, we missed out by a couple of spots, as opposed to we finished in the lower half and it's going to be quite hard to attract the same level of player. So for me, João Pedro needs to get out there and score goals and get us into a position where those conversations are easier. But at the same time, you don't want to risk someone just snapping him in half. You know how important he is.
The other massive talking point from this midweek game, especially, Craig, will stick with you on this one, was the omission of players from the squad. Ansu Fati and Valentin Barco did not travel. I suspect you're a lot less concerned about one than the other being left out. No, Valentin Barco, not too long in the country. We've seen the trajectory take place with Buonanotte and Alexis McAllister in the past. But the other one, Ansu Fati, left out and told to train on his fitness with an away day. What were your thoughts on that?
It's wild, isn't it? I think just it's all very public as well. Just in the it's quite clear to us as Brighton fans that he's not pulling the performances that he should be doing. But to publicly say you're not in the team, you need to go and work on your fitness is damning, I think, is the word that we used in our chat, right? So it's tough. It's really tough. Again, financially hasn't worked out, but from a shirt selling perspective, I'm sure it worked. From a reputation perspective, I'm sure it worked. But aside from that, it just hasn't been a good loan at all. And yeah, he's going to go back to Barcelona. And this is the problem, right? Is that I think the writing's on the wall. So why put in the performances? And you're in this weird situation now. So if De Zerbi say don't play, or you're coming off the bench for 15 minutes at a time, see if you can do anything. It's a lackluster loan, and it's probably an understatement.
Robin, 2 starts for Carlos Baleba. You talked a little bit about what you were hoping to see from him, and it's one of those players you want to see a lot from in the next 7 games. I think we all do. I think that's very much like the prevailing opinion here, and he didn't do too badly at all, did he? Both games, Brentford and Arsenal, 2 very different types of games, right, against 2 very different types of opponents, but there wasn't really anything that stood out in terms of his performances against either of them that you think, oh, not ready. Like, just take, for example, that 6 minutes of Barco at Anfield, and you think, oh, that was not great. And then you look at Carlos Baleba come on, and although 6 minutes is very harsh to judge him on, like he certainly looked at home, didn't he?
100%. I mean, I think in some of his early games, he had kind of the double issue of not really being up to speed physically with the Premier League. He just looked a bit like a headless chicken in certain areas. And you also had the fact that he's playing in a De Zerbi team, which, regardless of what position you're in, we know, we've heard it from basically every player how difficult it was to learn the system originally. So for players that have been here throughout De Zerbi's reign, it's taken them a while to get used to that position. And he's playing in one of the 2 positions, which are, the most difficult to master under De Zerbi. So he had these 2 kind of really difficult circumstances to get over. And he's now looking a lot better in both. He's looking a lot fitter in terms of his stamina in a game. He's looking a lot more confident in his role in the team. And you add that with, it was clear that he had kind of the raw ability, right? I mean, you could see that he was quick. You could see that he was physical. you knew that there was a player in there in the same way that, it's very similar to Basuma's trajectory. We talked about that before. So he's now really getting to the point where next season people will be expecting a lot more from him, reasonably, because that's what you give someone, 6 months a year to bed in, and he's really looking like he's going to be a top class midfielder, I think. And his stats, compared to Basuma, I was looking up the other day, he's made a very similar number of appearances to what Basuma did in his first year. It's almost identical in terms of games started, games come off the bench. So the trajectory is as close to identical as you're going to get. So if he continues that, then we've got a very exciting player.
And he matches that style so well. I know it's such a low-hanging fruit just going to place just like Bissouma, but every time you see him, I think, like Craig, that you think like he matches that style of play when everybody was hoping for a Caicedo replacement. It seems that we've totally gone the other way and gone for a more kind of dynamic midfielder as opposed to a more kind of one-dimensional central defensive midfielder.
Yeah, I think you need both types of players, right? Especially if you're looking at a double pivot that we're so used to nowadays, or two in midfield, one to break up and one to move forward. We were salivating at the point of having Caicedo and Basuma at one point, right? But it was just never to be. But you need them, right? And just his movement, like forwards and progressive movement, and being able to just get himself out of tight spots. He's still raw, right? He's still 20 years old. He still makes mistakes. He still misplaces passes and stuff. But like Robin said, this is a system that it takes a long time to learn and perfect and be good at. So if he continues on the path that he's on, then, next year is going to be a good year for him, especially if he's next to either Gilmour or Gross in that respect. So looks like he's learning a lot. And I think to Robin's point, just more minutes, right? Just get your reps in and continue to learn.
So last season, Basuma, sorry, Joe, I was going to say, Basuma's first season, he made 34 appearances across all competitions. Baleba has made, including yesterday, 29, with a very similar number of stats. So Basuma started 17 Premier League games in his first season. Baleba's now started 12. So when you get to the end of the season,
we may well be bang on the same come the end of the season, really.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's as close to identical as you're going to get.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm particularly looking forward to our end of season episode where we do the stay or go piece with our entire squad. Robin, I think you were on one way back in the day when we did it. When I did,
yeah, we did it. Yeah, it's a lot less exciting squad.
Yeah, but I think we all accept that central midfield is a position we need reinforcements in, but we also have an awful lot of central midfielders: Baleba, Gross, Moda, Gilmour. Like, not all of these players are going to be able to play, and it's going to be interesting for our stay or go, given that we're talking about Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, right? We're talking, especially now after Leicester have just released their accounts. For those that don't know, they made almost £90 million in losses, and they are way over on the wage turnover, like grossly over. That if they come up, essentially getting promoted to the Premier League is Leicester's only real viable way to survive as a genuinely competitive football club for the near
and they'll have a points deduction, right? If they come up.
Yes, they will get a points deduction. They will get they're already transfer embargoed. Frankly, if they don't go up, and I've said this to someone else, they're essentially going to be the next Portsmouth. They are going to plummet like a rock if they don't come up this season. Results went in their favour greatly yesterday, so they probably are going to make it. But they are going to be a selling club, and unfortunately for them, a little bit of a punching bag, right? Because they are going to be an incredibly weak squad. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, even though he's just on the back of a promotion season with Leicester, is going to be a free agent, essentially, in terms of how much they need to offload him. Very much fits the McAllister role. I've been watching a little bit more of Leicester over the last couple of, over Easter, because they were on all the frickin' time. And he just looks and plays like Alexis McAllister so similarly. So he fits that Gilmour side of things, right? And the Jakob Moda side of things. It's going to be interesting to see what that transfer market looks like in the summer when we clearly need an upgrade in that area.
I'm going to chuck a hand grenade in.
Yeah,
I'm chucking a hand grenade in, which is I don't think Pascal Gross will be here next season.
You think he's going to go?
Yeah, particularly if De Zerbi goes.
Right.
Because obviously they've got such a, we've seen that De Zerbi's basically played him into the ground, effectively. The last few games he's not been up to his levels that he's set, and he's clearly knackered. You can see that. His set pieces just look a bit laggy. He just looks generally knackered, right? It's not that difficult to tell.
Very tired.
He just looks tired. And De Zerbi is just, he is, to De Zerbi, probably the most important player. We had that interview a while ago where it's the first time I've seen him talk explicitly. Gross, this is about going back to Germany at some point. I know he's got a year left on his contract, but if we are going to go through what is either a rebuild or it's not even really a rebuild, we just need to add, we just need to do some building of the squad. I wouldn't be hugely surprised, especially with no European football. I wouldn't be hugely surprised to see a parting of the ways on, very good terms, but it wouldn't shock me. It feels like it might be the time to say goodbye whilst he's, still relatively at his peak.
What do you think about the idea of sending him off to Stuttgart, Craig, while we immediately nab back Dennis Undav, which De Zerbi has said he's going to be coming back and playing regularly next season? Do you think that's mind games? Bit of a drive the price up when the time comes, because this off season, or do you think that current Brighton with De Zerbi staying, do you think that Undav will be part of that squad next year? What are your thoughts? Mind games, like classic Tony Bloom poker stuff, or do you think that he will be coming back next year?
I think Stuttgart are doing really well, right? They're third? Just beat Dortmund. He's doing really well there. So it's obvious that he'd probably want to stay, right? It's a feel-good moment, and he's scoring lots of goals. He's doing really well in a country that it's rumored that he would prefer to be in. So we'll see. I think if you're trying to drive the price up on a clause that's probably already in writing, I think that's a bit silly. But from
what we've been told, it's a performance-related clause in that the better that Stuttgart do, the higher the price is.
Oh, so that's just they're going to tank the rest of the season like a MLS team, are they?
So basically, it's like if they qualify for the Champions League, for instance. Yeah, it's a proper football manager clause that you've put in, right? When you're desperate to get rid of someone, you put in from Stuttgart's point of view, they're desperate to get someone in on loan. So they've basically gone, if we qualify for the Champions League, we'll pay you this.
Yeah.
I think it's classic Tony Bloom mind games, I think, because, we've talked about is De Zerbi. If De Zerbi's not here, right, then he's kind of making decisions that the next manager might not wholly agree with. So it strikes me as mind games all round, right?
Yeah, I would. In any case, I would like to see him back. I think he's obviously gone and found his shooting boots again, and he was not necessarily terrible for us either, right? I think he was playing a role that he was asked to play. So we'll see, but it's another option, right? I think you're never going to say no to that. Like to Robin's point, we need to build, we need to add, we need to bring more people into this squad because we've seen how threadbare we are with the amount of injuries that you can see in a season. So I'd like to see him back. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he'll probably stay in Germany. But I mean, it's good what he's doing, and Stuttgart's a very weird story. I'm just. Very strange, a very weird Bundesliga in general, but by the by.
Yeah, I'm going to get onto that in a little bit before we wrap up as well. Let's talk the Brentford-Brighton game very quickly in terms of pretty much the only event to talk about, really. We had 24 shots in that game, only 6 of them on target, a lot of them blocked. 67% possession, 91% pass accuracy, 5 corners to their 1. We essentially played a classic low block Thomas Frank anti-football survive at all costs style of play. And for them, it's worked beautifully because they've took 2 points from Villa and Brighton. And one of them was at Villa Park. That's an incredible run of results for them who simply need to survive. I hated watching it, but fair play to them for backing themselves into a corner. We know a fully fit Brentford are obnoxiously fun team to watch, which always makes our games generally high scoring. But this one was horrible. What did we think of the penalty shout? It's not even. It ended with we had 1.1 xg and nobody had more than 0.3, which was Danny Welbeck with his opportunity towards the end. So realistically, the XG is not particularly representative of the chances created. Everybody didn't really do much of anything. Brentford were on 0.5, so I mean that says everything you need to know. So the only talking point really is the one that effectively would have decided the game in the penalty shout. Ref didn't give it. VAR were very much on board with the idea that it might well be. Ref went to the monitor and said no. What did you both make of that situation with Visser and Dunk in the penalty box? What were your thoughts? Was it a pen for you? Was it not a pen for you? How did you see that unfold?
I mean, they've both fouled each other, right, in the initial tussle. Like, I know it's neither of those fouls, but effectively they've both fouled each other. If they're then looking at what happens after that, that's like that in isolation is a penalty for me. Like, it's basically dragged him to the floor. It's whether or not you look at the fact that they've basically been tussling each other before that, and the referee's made a decision to go, well, you know, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Just probably where he's landed, right? He's probably looked at it and gone, you know, but you've basically just done the same thing to each other. But for me, the second bit where Visser is basically dragged into the ground, almost exactly where the ball's going to land, by the way. It's not like it's, you know, somewhere else in the box. Like, that is where the ball is landing. I mean, I thought when he was going to go to the screen, as De Zerbi said in the interview, it's like it's very rare for a referee to be sent to the screen and then not change his mind. It's probably for me 60-40 in favour of being a penalty.
Yeah, I think it's just when they are playing fisticuffs, right? Is it equal, or, you know, does Dunk cause Visser to make the foul? And I think that's where it becomes a little bit grey in that respect, right? Does Dunk cause his own foul in that respect? And I don't think so. I think if that's given, I don't think anyone's really talking about it. I think the fact that the talking point is around him going to the monitor and saying no, as opposed to the foul itself, and that's the news, probably tells you how grey this sort of decision was anyway. So, yeah, you win some, you lose some, right? I think, yeah, the talking point is not about the foul in general, but it's just if Dunk has caused the foul that's on him or not, and that's where your discussion point is. If it was given, I'd say fair enough. If it isn't given, I'm not losing any sleep about it. The unfortunate reality is that we needed something like a penalty because we were getting absolutely squat out of that game because it was very boring.
Let's talk penalty decision number 2. Arsenal. Bukayo Saka slotted the ball away very comfortably. Hopefully he can replicate that at the Euros. That's about the only nice thing I have to say about Arsenal in general. This one was a bit more grey area, bit of a veritable shitstorm all over social media as to whether it was or it wasn't. I know we've got different opinions on this one, so this will be a fun discussion. Penalty, Tarek Lamptey on Gabriel Jesus, whatever. Feels like it changes every season with him as to how they're pronouncing that. But what were your thoughts? And I'll start with Craig, because I already know Robin's answer. Craig, what were your thoughts on that? Was that a penalty for you, or was that not a penalty? Harsh? Where do you sit on that one?
I think it's harsh. I think this is less of a penalty than it would be a penalty. I think there's an element of obviously the contact and bits and pieces, but for me, I think Lamptey touches the ball or deviates the trajectory of that ball, which indicates that he's got a touch, and then the contact is the aftermath, right? And I think this is where I try to put it in perspective of any other challenge, right? If I slide tackle someone, but I get the ball and then I get the guy afterwards, as long as my studs aren't up, then it's what's considered a tackle, right? So it's just about, for me, separating the contact of the ball versus the contact of the man. slight touch or a complete, annihilation of the football, I think the rule is roughly the same. So for me, I don't think it was a penalty. With taking my rose tinted glasses off, I can see probably why it's been given, or for whatever reason. I don't think there's a conspiracy against like us and penalty decisions. But I don't think it is personally. And I think on another day, it's not given. And yeah, consistency.
So I'll give the alternate option because I know Robin's going to bounce back the other way. So, like for me, when I saw it, the first thing I thought was like, oh shit, like that's an absolute stonewall pen. Like in real time, I thought there's no way it's not a pen. He's just wiped him out. Replays obviously showed him getting that slight touch on the ball, but I don't think it changes the trajectory enough to take the ball into what I would consider like Lamptey's possession or control. It just punts it away such a negligible amount. I think it is still really like if he hadn't have wiped out Jesus, I think he just like retains possession. Like just maybe he has to like take a couple of extra touches before trying to beat his man. But I don't think it changes the possession of the football. And for me, like I think it was definitely a pen. Like I don't have any complaints about it. For me, like I just think it was. I think it was just one of those things. Like I think that he went in a bit too hard and he caught the man quite heavily. And like you can't just clip the ball like half a millimeter and then be like, well, it's fine that I just like swipe the man because I clipped the ball. But in terms of reffing and VAR, here's the other issue I suppose that I have with it. I think if he hadn't have given it, I don't think it gets given. And that, for me, is a fundamental problem with the entire process. I don't think that if that is not given by Brooks, which it always was going to be because the referee was absolutely playing in yellow and black yesterday. Like he was very poor, had little control over the game and essentially allowed Arsenal to run the game and do whatever they wanted. I think that if he hadn't have given it, though, I don't think VAR go back on that and give it for him personally. But for me, I didn't have a lot of complaints. I think if that was at the other end, and Adingra is the exact same tackle on Adingra from Ben White, who I'm sure we'll talk about shortly in very, very few nice words to say. I'd be livid if that's not given as a pen for me personally. Second issue is I don't think it would be given for us either way. I don't think the ref or VAR would even dream of giving it as a penalty, which obviously inherently comes into the issue of the way VAR is utilised and the referee biases that we see. And thanks to Mike Dean, have been fully confirmed because he's an absolute idiot and can't help to blab his mouth. Robin, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about the entire game? You were very, very, very upset about that game yesterday. So I mean, I'm just going to let you riff off on
it. Craig has summed up the penalty a lot more eloquently than I probably will. I'm with him in that. So long as I'm kind of like he's gone in. He's effectively made a legitimate tackle because he's touched the ball, right? So then we're basically arguing over, is the follow through effectively aggressive enough to warrant a penalty being given, right? That's where I think we're all at that point. We all go, right, he touched the ball. So is it what's happened after that? I'm very much like, as far as I'm concerned, he can't change the physics of what happens after. Like he cannot change what happens with where his body's going after that. I don't think he's gone in. He's not gone in 2-footed. He's not, he has made a genuine attempt to win the ball and has touched the ball. So I can see the argument. If he'd have basically gone in, effectively jumped in 2-footed, made a little contact with the ball, and then wiped him out. For me, that's a penalty, right? But I think he's made a more than genuine attempt to win the ball. I also think Gabriel Jesus is going down before the contact slightly as well, having looked at it a few times. So it's just not a penalty, like in any world. On the VAR point, I think where we are still, which is so frustrating, is where we've been throughout, which is how is the system supposed to get the right decision every time, or is it looking for massive errors? Because those are two wholly different things, right? And the problem that you've got is that VAR is being used differently in different games. So in some games, it very much looks like they are looking at things for 5 minutes to try and find the correct decision, whatever that is. In other games, it's a very quick cursory glance to see whether there's an obvious error that's been made. I'll be honest, I don't really care which of those two routes they take, but they have to take the same route in every game. So if you're going to spend 5 minutes trying to find the right decision, that's probably very boring for everybody, right? Like, we've all sat there in stadiums or watched games on TV where basically everyone's sitting twiddling their thumbs whilst they look at the replay 100 times from every angle to try and work out what's gone on, right? That's probably the most boring option. But they've basically got to pursue one of those options every time, right? Otherwise, it's a farce. Because it's like, what are you trying to achieve? Because they're not doing the same thing every time. So that's, I mean, they're never going to sort that, I don't think, because they've dug themselves into such a hole with this that I see no way that they can read. I see no way that they can, like, basically press the reset button on this. The game as a whole, I mean, Arsenal were very good. You know, we talked about, you know, they've not conceded a goal in 6 away games. You know, they don't concede a goal at Man City. So I'm not suggesting that we win that game. But, you know, it's not, well, you know, for me, it's not a penalty for the first goal. And, you know, for the second goal, there's the most obvious shirt pull foul you're going to see committed on Danny Welbeck that you're probably going to see in any Premier League game this season, which is obviously not given. And then they inevitably counterattack and score a second goal. Third goal is just no point discussing it, because they're kind of at that point, you know, you may as well lose 3-0 at that point. If, you know, you've got to get a goal back, right? So, you know, you may as well be committing everybody forward. The fact is,
what did you make of the returning Albion contingent, though? Because we've seen the Chelsea returning Albion contingent absolutely hate us, which is fine. We hate. It's very clear, right? Sanchez can't stand the Albion at all. Cucurella, obviously not at all either, after everything that's gone on. But obviously the reception and the respect between Alexis McAllister and the Albion is massive. Ben White, slightly different world as well. Obviously, he'd left under Potter, and Trossard obviously left under a bit of a cloud as well. Did you find it, like, what did you think to their performances, the celebrations, the inciting of nonsense, Ben White deciding that he was an episode, like a kind of an extra on a platoon? Like, what was? It's a very, they're an interesting team, Arsenal, aren't they? With the way they operate, they reflect their manager quite aptly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to go against the grain, which is I've got very little problem with Trossard in general. Like, I didn't find his celebration yesterday wildly over the top. I thought it was pretty measured, considering. He obviously didn't go the full, I'm not going to celebrate at all. But at the same time, I don't think he really went too extreme with it. I know that, you know, there are differing opinions about how he left, you know, whether he downed tools, etc. or not. But I've got no problem with him. I thought he was a great player when we had him. He scored some pretty important goals. You know, you could tell when he was with us, right? Like, he had that attitude sometimes where if things weren't going his way, or, you know, he was just in a different mood, you could tell that he was a slightly interesting character in that regard. So I've got no problem with anything that he did yesterday. And I think if you probably talked about it in an interview, I'd imagine he probably reflects pretty well on his time at the club. I've got no problem with that. Ben White, I mean, it's just like what he did yesterday. It's just embarrassing, right? I mean, it's embarrassing for Arsenal. It's embarrassing for Ben White. I mean, in social media today, it's just been a joy to watch, as basically every non-Arsenal fan has just been rinsing him. It's just embarrassing. You're totally right. I mean, Arteta he's just so childish, right? Like, he comes across to me as so childish in basically everything that he does. You know, whether it's the sarcastic, you know, clapping of referees, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, it's not hugely surprising, but
I mean, he learned from the best, didn't he? So
yeah, no, he did in that respect. But, you know, Trossard is, you know, it's fine. I didn't find it too offensive.
I'm completely indifferent. Like it really wasn't. I think I wasn't really expecting anything anyway. I think, but you think all this nonsense about Ben White not liking football and stuff, like this is just a job to him. So there's no there's no affiliation or anything like that. I don't care. He's embarrassing anyway. So we covered that. But the whole Trossard thing, right? Like he fell out with the manager, not with the club, right? Like I feel no ill towards him whatsoever. You knew the player that you had, you knew the player that was leaving. So it's just annoying that he got to score against us. I know I'd feel the same with Caicedo or McAllister, right? Irrespective of affirmations or whatever, right? I don't want former players to score against us because it's annoying.
Yeah, not at all. I will say one thing there is to be said that's a positive about Arsenal, and that is Kai Havertz. Been under a lot of shit since he moved to Arsenal. And it's all been a little bit quiet on Kai. I was a big fan of him at Leverkusen. I thought he was going to be a really good player. And then he went to Chelsea and he was just an absolute pathetic specimen of a footballer. And I thought, okay, like he's just not making the transition. But no, like it's nice for me as a fan of Kai Havertz, not Arsenal or Chelsea whatsoever. It's a fan of him, like watching him play football when he was at his best. Like, I mean, it's only 24 now, hell. But 9 goals, 5 assists this season for Kai Havertz. Everybody took the piss at that transfer. But once again, this methodology of it's probably Chelsea's fault seems to be reflecting positively, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And he scored some important goals for them. I'm with you. You know, Chelsea fans kind of laughing, thinking, oh, we've got rid of this absolute idiot. You know, has backfired pretty quickly because, you know, there's a great player in there who is showing why he's a great player originally. But yeah, he's probably one of the few likable ones in their team. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of Liverpool in general, but I'd be wildly happy if they won the league ahead of Arsenal. And it's not as a result of yesterday's game specifically. I just don't find much to like about their squad, to be honest.
Do you think they do it deliberately? Like this
probably,
is
probably.
Yeah, it's just one of the things where it's like, and I have a lot of friends that are Arsenal fans, and I can respect how damn good they are, right? Like they're probably, I don't say they're going to win the league, but they're going to be incredibly close. But it just feels like they're deliberately unlikable, right? Like it's a theme, right? You know, if people don't like us, then we're going to get more out of this. But I don't know if they just do it on purpose. But yeah, it's just turned from something a few years ago, and this is just my perspective. I could be talking utter horse crap, but like it feel like a few years ago, this hardworking, you know, young team that's like trying to do everything, and now they've turned very petulant and very, I wouldn't say I guess gamesmanship is the right word, right? In managing the game in every way that they can, and if they can, then fantastic, because 3 points are 3 points, right? But they've added that element to their game now, that element of gamesmanship and maybe petulancy, where they can drive the game to where they need it to be.
Yeah,
Burnley
next. Speaking of petulance, Burnley next. 19 points they're on from 32 games. Forest have a game in hand on them. Everton, of course, are due for yet another hearing tomorrow, which may see another points deduction. The general consensus is that will happen, which will drag them right back into that fight with at least with Forest and Luton. Burnley are all but gone, right? I think it's fair to say. They're going to need a minor miracle to become competitive, even in that kind of 15th through 18th group. They're really poor. They're really far behind. What in terms of the squad you're expecting to see at Turf Moor, they've had some really important games. You know, they've just had Everton, which they failed to get a result from in the Dyche derby. And they got Sheffield United right after us. Obviously, we're now back to weekly stuff, so rest is fine, right? Everybody's getting like a regular 7-day between games. What kind of squad are you hoping for? This is really one of those only 2 games for me this season that I'm expecting points from that are left. Like to me, like you go full strength, and this is like De Zerbi's time to show us why we're still actually a team to be reckoned with at any level. And I want like a Sheffield United-esque performance. What are you two expecting? Are you a bit less optimistic on that? Or are you feeling the same kind of bolshiness, I guess, that I'm feeling? Like, I expect us to go there and beat shit out of them. Like, I expect that. Like, that's what I expect from De Zerbi and this team, given what they are supposed to be able to represent for him and his managerial style for a team that are effectively dead and buried.
Yeah, I mean, I expect us to go there full strength because we've got a week gap. There's no midweek game. There's nothing else to rest players for. There's not any other competitions that he needs to factor in or any games. So I think going full strength is kind of a bare minimum there. I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because as we've said, we've not got a huge amount to play for. And they are still, depending on the scope of Everton's potential points deduction, in theory,
really changes everything, doesn't it? Like it hinges on everything tomorrow.
Let's say Everton get, for argument's sake, let's say Everton get 10 points, right? I don't know whether that's wildly, extreme in terms of what they might get, but hypothetically, let's say Everton get 10 points, right? That brings Everton and Burnley level on points all of a sudden. So, and then they're only 6 points behind with Sheffield United to play still, and they finish at home to Forest on the last day of the season. So if they were to beat us as well, that's 9 points, right? Takes them to 28 points. Which, depending on other factors, I mean, I think they've obviously got more to play for than we do. So it will come down to wholly the attitude of the players and De Zerbi, right? Like, if De Zerbi's kind of in this, Sassuolo end of days, right? Mindset, which he might not be, but, are the players going to be, that old kind of on the beach cliche, right? If the players maybe feel like De Zerbi isn't going to be here next season, then what incentive do they necessarily have to be like, okay, I want to get into De Zerbi's good books for next season, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not suggesting that we're not going to go there and batter them, but I think it's a difficult game because there's definitely all of the other circumstances make it mean that Burnley are still in there. They're still in the fight because there's these other external factors going on.
I think if you're Burnley, you're looking at this game, you're looking at Sheffield United, you're looking at Nottingham Forest at the end of the season, and you're going, those are the 3 games that we need to go absolutely gung-ho for and try and get 9 points here because of the points deductions and all the permutations that you're seeing with all of the charges, left, right, and rhubarb, right? So if you're Burnley, you're going, right, Brighton are coming here, they're bang out of form, right? They've got a really tough run in, like, we need to be at it. So my head says we should beat them quite comfortably. They've got 19 points from 31 games, right? But like Robin just alluded to, that might not be the case. So this is Brighton and Hove Albion that we support, and we know what can and can't happen. So we have to be on it. I think it has to be a full strength team. You have to go and control the game because if you don't, then something can happen. And we need a result on Saturday.
Yeah, I think we really do. Like, this and Bournemouth, for me, are like the 2 we need to get 3 points from each. I know it's going to be a tougher game, but we need to get points. I think just to wrap it up, De Zerbi obviously really in the frame for Bayern Munich now, it seems. Bayer Leverkusen are 1 game away from sealing the title. 1 more win. It would honestly, like, it would make Spurs look like the most like confident club in the world if Leverkusen messed this up compared. Like, it would be the biggest Spurs bottle job I've ever seen in my life. So they're absolutely going to win it. Bayern Munich are second, level on points with Stuttgart. Leipzig, Dortmund are below them, quite a gap there as well. De Zerbi seems to be very much in the frame for Bayern Munich. Seems like regardless of how this season ends, he's still very much in the frame. Just for both of you, given that Bayern Munich's last 2 seasons have been bit dodgy, haven't they, really? Like last season, they had to rely on Dortmund fluffing their lines in order to win the title on the last day of the season. And this season, they've been absolutely destroyed by one of the most generational football teams in our lives, really, in terms of the way this Leverkusen season has gone. Like we're very, 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 very close to an Arsenal invincible season, which in these top 4 or 5 seasons, like in these top 4 or 5 leagues, very rarely happens. How do you think De Zerbi's style would translate to a team of the caliber of Bayern Munich? Do you think his defensive frailties that we've seen everywhere, in Sassuolo, especially in Brighton, do you think those frailties are not nullified because they'll never go away, but do you think they are offset by the sheer talent at his disposal? And it's a bit of like the perfect thing for him? Or do you think that it's the opposite, really, and a really risky move because the last thing they need is any kind of fragility and they need to go with a bit more of a boring option? And I know you probably didn't expect to finish the podcast talking about Bayern pissing Munich, but probably the best manager in our club's history currently in terms of the way he's got the finish in Europe ever, like, is probably on his way there. So, but like, do you think his style will translate? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's going to be a mistake?
It's going to be an absolute car crash. And I don't say that like out of any sort of bitterness. They actually debated this on 5 Live during the week. They have their EuroLeagues show, and they devoted about 20-25 minutes to this. It's worth it. It was on kind of Wednesday, Thursday this week, potentially, if you want to go and look it up. Obviously they had a couple of German football journalists on there, and they effectively alluded to the fact that what we've said, Bayern Munich's a very difficult job because the expectation is that you win every game, right? It's not that you just win every competition. The expectation is you win every game. So what we've slightly flippantly said before, where it's a very boring job because basically you're expected to win the league. And if you do win the league, no one's really patting you on the back because you're expected to win the league. If you don't win the league, you basically get sacked and you're probably not winning the Champions League, right? Like, you're probably not. So it's a very risky job from that perspective, right? But what you also have to put into play is that at the same time, you have to be very, very good with the media. Like, the German media is probably even more unforgiving than the British media is. And we know what De Zerbi can be like, right? At the moment, he's said some things in English that have created a few news stories where you're wondering whether is it his sort of not quite being fluent in English, whether it's caused any problems. So you basically be very good with the media. You've got to keep Thomas Muller happy at Germany because he basically still, is still the guy there. You've got to, it's basic. You have to be a politician at Bayern as much as you have to be a football manager. And I think De Zerbi's quite abrasive nature. We've seen that, he's abrasive with the press, with the national press. He's kind of quite abrasive even with the club's in-house press, right? Like not calling out, but asking everyone to be better, etc. I think it would go very, very badly because what we've seen is you've got to go and drum in a totally new style of football, right? Yes, granted, he's going to be working with an average better quality of player than he's working with us, right? But still, you've got to go in to a team that's just not won the league for, the first time in 10 years, would it be? Something like that. So you've basically got a pre-season to turn around the fact that they've not won the league, introduce a wholly new style into a squad, and hit the ground running with no margin for error whatsoever. Because they're not going to give him a break for introducing a brand new style. They're going to expect it to work straight away. So that's my monologue on it. I think it would be a disaster. And that's kind of what they were alluding to on 5 Live, which is the other name that was being mentioned was Ralph Rangnick as the safe pair of hands to basically go in there and steady the ship slightly. The other question as well, which is obviously, Xabi Alonso has said no for this year. In 12 months' time, is Xabi Alonso ready to move? Because he's scratched the itch effectively of going, he's had a go at the Champions League with this Bayer Leverkusen squad, right? And he's seen what he can do with it. If he decides in 12 months' time, okay, he's ready to go, and yes, he would be interested in Bayern Munich, they're not like, are they going to go and get De Zerbi with the idea that maybe in a year's time they want Xabi Alonso? Like, I just, for a whole bunch of reasons, I just don't see it as being a logical step for anyone.
And that's the thing, is that everything, and I agree with you, right? Everything points towards this being a really bad idea, right? And just everything just sums up, right? De Zerbi's talking about building a legacy and stuff like that. It just doesn't fit that Bayern Munich ethos or what they stand for or what they expect, which makes it even more likely that he's probably going to go there, because it's always going to be the most unlikely of things. For me, if he wants to manage at the top, you can't begrudge him for that. The only thing that he would probably be asking for is give me a year to sort things out, right? And I think Bayern Munich typically, and 9 times out of 10, would go, absolutely not. You need to win every game. You need to go and win the Bundesliga this year. But you do have Xabi Alonso staying for another year at Leverkusen doing generational things, right? So if there's 1 year where there's less pressure on Bayern Munich, it's when you've got a outstanding Leverkusen team that is probably expected to win next year, right? Especially if Alonso stays. So if there's one season that Bayern Munich are going to give up and try and bring something new in, it's going to be next season, especially if Xabi Alonso stays. So that could be my only possible thinking around why De Zerbi would even factor in a move to Bayern Munich, is saying, is the pressure going to be off me next year? Because I need to get these guys drilled, honed, everything in between. And the expectation of Leverkusen winnings means that I don't have that level of expectation, at least not for this year. So that's the only thing I could think of. Also, the fact of German ultras yelling at De Zerbi on the pitch just makes me laugh inexplicably. So I can't imagine how that would go. But it'd be funny. So I think it's probably the most likely destination. I would still be surprised if he ended up there.
Yeah.
Good shit. Yeah, I think that's really good points, everybody. I think this summer is just going to be so fascinating. It's such a fascinating off season for us. I know I mentioned it at the start about being an off epilogue.
I was going to say, can we finish on, if De Zerbi goes, right? What direction are we going in? I know this could go on, this is potentially one of those ones where we go, how long have you got? But briefly, anyone got any thoughts on it will probably, whatever we say, right? Tony Bloom's going in a different direction. I think that's probably safe to say, right? But if you're in charge, Josh,
yeah,
I'm switching roles here for a minute, right? If you're in charge, if you're Tony Bloom in the summer and Roberto De Zerbi goes, who are you going for? Where's your head at?
You've got to be going for someone who's going to keep the same style of football, right? We've been abundantly clear in the way Bloom has appointed his managers that he wants this style of football. They're all much of a muchness, right? Potter's style and De Zerbi's style are both incredibly different, but also incredibly similar. And when you watched us against Brentford, it was basically watching Graham Potter's side play against Brentford. But the ethos is very different. So I think we'll be seeing a move like that 100%. There's no doubt in my mind that we'll be seeing someone come in with that kind of idea behind them. In terms of who they go for, it's going to be someone I've never heard of before. I'm sure you mentioned it last night. The lad from Nice, possibly the lad that's kind of one of De Zerbi's babies, may well be someone coming in. Maybe we'll do something utterly nuts and go for a McKenna or a Liam Rosenior. I know you mentioned him a few times. Robin will probably be on that interview list. But I mean, McKenna at Ipswich is unbelievably good. It's also a very Tony Bloom thing to do, to give that person that chance, right? We saw it with De Zerbi, and Potter. We've seen it before, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ipswich don't go up if there's not whispers of us at least talking to him if De Zerbi leaves, which I don't know how to feel about that. I'm not watching enough Ipswich to know, but like it would scare me a little bit, right? Because, and whenever you start a new season with new management, I don't think it matters how established you are, unless you're a top 6 club, then you're fine. Like, because the sheer amount of money and obnoxiousness that you've got to go with you is all right. Like, for me, you should be considering 40 points as your first priority. I don't care who you are. Like, we saw Watford, right? 7 years ago, or whatever it was now, feels like forever ago. Like, finished 8th in the league. They were flying under Marco Silva. They actually had a semblance of organisation structure on and off the pitch. Everything was going great. Marco Silva leaves. I can't remember who they got in after that, but it was someone who was supposed to do pretty well for them. And they went down 19th place. Their squad didn't change. They actually invested a bit of cash into some new players. One of those, João Pedro, I believe, at like 17, 18 years old. And they went down. They got relegated. And that was when Watford turned into that meme club of like firing their manager every 3 weeks. Doesn't matter who you are. Teams like that at our level are always going to be susceptible to a slump. We appointed Sami Hyypiä, remember, and we're almost relegated because he put us into such a bad position with essentially not much of a different squad to the one that Houghton then turned around and got promoted and did some great stuff with. So for me, like, whoever you're bringing in, Europe is like a distant dream. Don't even worry about it. Like, let's get you in. Let's get you into what you think of the squad, what you'd like about it, where we were looking at strengthening in the first place, what kind of style you're looking to play, what formation you're looking to play. Let's strengthen the squad for you. You can't allow this man to analyze the squad and you do jack shit in the transfer window because you're letting him analyze the squad. No, you can't do it. You've got to give him a position to succeed from, and we've all seen it all season that we need reinforcement. So you go out and you spend your money regardless, and you give the guy basically a 1 year free hit as long as he's not got his bottom of the league like Sami Hyypiä has. Do I think that Tony Bloom will make the same mistake twice and bring in such a dead rubber as Sami Hyypiä? No, I don't. But for me, like, I'm not going to forget where we've came from. I've watched better teams with more money, far more money than us, go down that are considered too good to go down. One bad managerial appointment can torpedo a season and turn it from a good, what should be a good one, to a relegation scrap. We've seen it with teams. So for me, that's all I'm bothered about. Get them in and make sure that we hit that 40 points first and foremost. Now, if we do that 40 points by January, let's fucking go. Let's do it. Like, great. Tony Bloom's right again. But for me, like, that is the boring, pessimistic side of like new manager, 4 or 5 new signings, probably, that will be like first team in and out, like that level I'm expecting. Possibly losing Mitoma or Pedro or both, right? Like, they're both going to be up and about in that conversation piece. For me, get him in, get him comfortable, and get safe. Like, let's target that first and foremost. Do I think we'll be in the bottom 3? No. I think that we would have to reappoint Sami Hyypiä if we were going to be in that position. But do I think that we should prioritize that as first and foremost with a new manager in the Premier League, especially if he's never managed in this league before? Yeah, I do. Like, I think we need to remember how many very good, very wealthy teams have gone down before us. And let's just make sure we position ourselves in a position to be secure.
To that point, do you think that Tony Bloom will therefore be pushing De Zerbi for an answer before the end of the season?
I am, if he is going, here's my bold take. If he is going, I am fully expecting an announcement, just like the one he did for Sassuolo.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to.
If he's going, we will know before United.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think this. I think I agree with all of that. That, you know, if he's going, it makes it a very interesting. It was going to be an interesting summer anyway, right? Regardless, if he's going, to all of your points, for that all to work, you need a new manager installed ASAP, right? We're not having some saga running on for like 6-8 weeks after the season finishes.
He's got to be in before the Euro start. Like,
yeah, so like, That's what I wonder. Like, we're going to know in the next month, right? Realistically,
I think
we're
so.
going to know what's going on. Also, on Watford managers, this is a complete aside, but it's my favourite stat of all time. There have been more Watford managers since 2019 than there have been Dalai Lamas since 1589.
They are the worst team ever. I just can't
They
believe
are.
how crap they are.
But yeah, I think I'm with you. I think we would go. I think I'm not sure what direction we go in. Like I say, Liam Rossini, I know that they like him. They like him a lot. I mean, it's not surprising, right? Like he was great when he was here. You could tell that he wanted to go into coaching. He always spoke very sensibly. He's actually doing pretty well with Hull. I know they've obviously had a new owner, but they've been a bit of a basket case club, off the pitch for a while, and he's got them on the
Ever
brink
since they went down, really.
Yeah, he's got them on the brink of the playoffs. I haven't really watched them enough to know a whole bunch about the brand of football they play, so I don't know whether he would fit the philosophy in terms of that, but certainly sort of personality-wise, I think he's kind of bang on. Yeah, the Nice guy is Francesco Farioli, who I think De Zerbi gave him his first coaching thing. I was saying to you, Josh, I was like frustratingly, he was born in 1989. I mean, like, Christ, like the fact he's already seen, like, he's kind of already like an experienced manager, as it were. He's the kind of the obvious one that you would go for. I mean, seen talk earlier in the season of like Amarin if he doesn't go to Liverpool. I think that's wildly optimistic without European football. I think if De Zerbi if we'd have qualified for the Europa League again and De Zerbi leaves, I think you're then looking for a wholly different type of manager to the one that we probably are going to look for. But I don't know. I think all we know is it will probably be someone that we haven't talked about. I think that's probably the only conclusion we can draw.
Yeah, it'll be exciting nonetheless. I think, like I said, the amount of sort of managerial merry-go-rounds that are happening this summer as well just makes it more interesting. So, but just to echo Josh's point, like one bad decision can really mess things up. So to your point, if he is going to go, it needs to be early doors. You need to give him 2-3 months and a new set of players if you're going to go and buy players, and just give them the option to succeed, and then it's completely up to them, right? If like you said, if you leave them with scraps, then you're not going to get anything. So we'll see. I mean, it's important, and I think that's why it's important for us to finish as high as possible. Again, the caliber of manager that we can bring in, to say that we were 6 points off Europe as opposed to 20 points off Europe, it is a very different conversation. So we'll see.
It's going to be wild, really. Like the merry-go-round thing is like that's going to cause some problems, right? Like the Man United scenario, right? Like, are they going to make a quick decision on Ten Hag? Because, like, if I'm De Zerbi, right, like, I'm absolutely going to Man United ahead of Bayern Munich. Like,
and you've got the Euros in the middle of all this.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
So, like, it's not even just like because the European managerial merry-go-round is probably going to be one of the wildest ones in recent years.
Yeah.
With an international tournament smack bang in the middle of it, which means inevitably some of those managers will both expectedly and unexpectedly become available based on performances.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That throws even more spanners into the fucking work. It's going to be weird.
So does it make it more likely that that De Zerbi stays in amongst all of that? Because Tony Bloom because you've got clubs just going, they're not going to be able to make a decision. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think De Zerbi goes anywhere unless he can do it early and have a full pre-season.
I agree with that.
We know that. 100%. Like he needs, like wherever, if he's going somewhere, his methods need every second that he's got to get.
I don't even think
it's right.
Just that though. I think morally too, he believes that he should provide that good position for us or any team he's been with.
Yeah,
he believes he should provide that opportunity for those clubs to replace him with good enough time, and he also then, from his own perspective, wants that time to bed in. So, like, all across the board, like, I think he's not going to... If he's going early. And if that's the case, yeah, it is what it is. I feel like
it'll be fascinating. It'll be fascinating because without an international tournament, I think it runs a lot smoother. So, bizarrely, the fact that more jobs in theory might be available, but the fact you've got an international tournament in the middle, totally bizarrely, might make it more likely that he stays.
Because I mean, you
Just
have
wild.
Southgate. You have us crash out in the second round, right? And Southgate gets binned off, and like all of a sudden the talk is back to Eddie Howe, and then Newcastle might have a managerial approach. Like, do you know what I mean? Like those things keep
It's
coming.
both
like,
ways, right? Like
yeah.
Southgate wins the Euros, right? And he's going out on a high.
And he goes to
suddenly
United.
everyone wants Southgate. Like
I
it
would
works
love it to
both
go to
ways,
a
right?
club. Any of them tanking under Southgate would be my dream. I don't care which one because he's going to be bad.
It's going to be
so I would love that.
wild. It's going to be really wild to see what happens.
It feels like, for me, like the army, like it feels like you really can separate them into like little like books of like, and I mentioned at the start like that it feels like these games post Roma and Wolves are almost the epilogue of this book, and like it started with Potter's appointment. Like literally the day Houghton left and Potter was appointed feels like the start of this book in our history. And it obviously, Houghton's era was its own book from start to finish because it was just nuts from all the way through the Middlesbrough game and all that stuff. Like, but it feels very much like this is the end of this one. Like it started with the beginning of Potter and it's likely going to end with De Zerbi leaving and the end of the European campaign and kind of that whole new like fresh start again where we are a totally different team to the one Potter inherited, and we're a totally different team altogether in terms of the finances and the goals and everything. Like it's going to be so fascinating to see what essentially this prologue of the summer shows us. It's going to be absolutely mental. I think normally we don't talk vocally to each other for 3 months in the summer, like because it's just quiet. Like we're quite boring as a football club. I think we're going to have more podcast episodes in the summer than we've probably ever had as a podcast since I threw this thing together with a box of scraps. like I think that we're going to have a bunch. I think we may end up having like 3 or 4 episodes of this summer alone, based on everything that's probably about to take place.
And you got also throwing the fact that the club's going on a Far Eastern tour as well into all of this. As well, they're going to Japan, I'm pretty sure. So you've also got that in amongst the mix as well. This is not a normal, this is not an Albion preseason where everyone's going to be kicking around Lancing for the whole summer. You've got to have half the squads, well, not half the squad, a decent chunk of the squad are going to be away at the Euros. The rest of them are going to be in the Far East. So if you're trying to bring in a new manager in amongst all of that, it's going to be chaos. Which is why I think, like I say, if he's going to go, it's going to be announced pretty soon. And I don't think they'll take very long. I don't think they'll have very long. They won't be very long before they announce a replacement, right? Like they're going to know. Tony Bloom is, he's going to know probably who his top two are. Top two
it will
need to be considered.
I think we'll have. I think
but it's
we'll have
Potter, right? I mean, like that Potter scenario where he's basically announced, effectively announced almost before Houghton's sacked, right?
Yeah, I think if De Zerbi is going, we will know who our new manager is by June 1st.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that's where we need to be.
Yeah.
All right. Happy 250, lads, and here's to 250 more. It's been a wild ride, and God knows where we are 250 episodes from now. It's the joy. I
think when you started episode 1, you didn't think episode 250 would be dissecting a European campaign, right?
Exactly. It was very much right in the middle of Chris Houghton's second season in the Premier League, so we were dissecting being beaten 5-0 by Bournemouth at home, which was not as fun as this one. So, all right, we will be back next week for Burnley recap. I will be going. That's my last away game of the season. Can't go to the Newcastle one because I'm going to go watch Olivia Rodrigo instead. I am just a teenage girl in my soul. But yeah, this is my last one. So if anybody is going to Burnley Way, feel free to say hi. And we will be back next week to cover that. And like we've said, there'll be a lot going on this week with the points deductions as to what on earth that game is even going to look like. So have a good week, everybody. Enjoy it. A lot of football over the last week or two with Easter and 3 games in about 6 days, I think. So enjoy a week off. We probably desperately need it as a squad. So see you next week. Have a good one.
Cheers all.